In one of the remaining blockbuster cases facing the Supreme Court this term, the justices handed a Christian baker a win by a 7-2 margin after he declined to make a custom cake for a gay couple and their wedding. But today's decision also left some unanswered questions.
Justice Kennedy has held that tolerance is a two-way street, and Jack Phillips was not tolerated by the Civil Rights Commission of Colorado.
We got your back, Jack!
The legal team for Colorado baker Jack Phillips is celebrating today after a 7-2 Supreme Court opinion holding that Phillips never got a fair shake when he was sued by a gay couple after declining to create a custom cake in celebration of their same-sex wedding. Writing for the majority, Justice Kennedy noted that at least one of the Colorado commissioners who heard the original complaint likened Phillips' explanation and religious beliefs to those who supported slavery and the Holocaust. Quote, "This sentiment is inappropriate for a commission charged with the solemn responsibility of fair and neutral enforcement of Colorado's anti-discrimination law." Kennedy pointed out that a number of the commissioner's statements implied, quote, that religious beliefs and persons are less than fully welcome in Colorado's business community. But Kennedy himself noted that the broader legal issues in this dispute are far from settled and must be done so with tolerance for both sides, leaving LGBT advocates with mixed feelings.
We're certainly disappointed that the Supreme Court found in this narrow set of circumstances in favor of the baker. But what's important here is the Supreme Court in no way undermined our nation's civil rights laws.
The couple at the center of the case, Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins, say, quote, "Today's decision means our fight against discrimination and unfair treatment will continue. We will continue fighting until no one does." In Justice Ginsburg's dissent, joined by Justice Sotomayor, she found it irrelevant that Phillips sold cakes and cookies to gay and lesbian customers, despite the fact that he would not create custom wedding cakes for them, adding, quote, "I see no reason why the comments of one or two commissioners should be taken to overcome Phillips' refusal to sell a wedding cake to Craig and Mullins." So, two big decisions at the Supreme Court today dealing with two hot-button issues: religious freedom and abortions for underage teens who are in the U.S. illegally. So let's talk about the political impact with Tyler Deaton, Senior Advisor of the American Unity Fund, and Tony Perkins, President of the Family Research Council. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, so obviously Justice Kennedy pointed back to those comments by a commissioner at the lowest level who was the first to look at this case, likening the baker's religious convictions to people who supported slavery or to Nazis. Tyler, that was enough for him to say, we're not really going to get to the meaty merits of this case, but on that basis alone, he should never have been subjected to that kind of discrimination against his religious beliefs.
Yeah, and that attitude is completely out of bounds, and since then that commissioner is no longer even on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. And I think what it points to is those were hurtful statements to make about people of faith. I think that there are a lot of LGBT Americans who are also hearing sometimes hurtful things said about them. And I think that all of this is pointing to the need for us to come together, come and find some sort of a middle ground where people of faith and LGBT people can both be respected by the laws and can now just be out in the free marketplace doing their business and know that they're free to pursue their American dream, regardless of their values or regardless of who they're married to.
Yeah, and today Justice Kennedy, he acknowledged basically that the courts still have to decide the meat of this case, and he said there has to be tolerance on both sides for people with genuine religious beliefs, and as you said, for people who are gay and lesbian who want to be in commerce and in business. So he said it's going to be a delicate question to answer. Now, we know that on Thursday in their private conference, the justices are going to consider the case of a Washington florist who basically has been put in ruin by what she's faced. A longtime customer of hers came to her and said, "I want you to do the flowers for my same-sex wedding." She politely declined, referred him to another florist, three others actually. But Tony, the fact that they're even going to consider that case certainly says they know the core issue has not yet been decided.
Oh, without question, without question. And nobody should be surprised by this, Shannon, because 3 years ago in the Obergefell case, the four justices warned of this. Right. Alito in particular said that this is going to lead to the vilification of those who refuse to assent to the new orthodoxy. And so we're seeing this. That's exactly what the Colorado so-called Civil Rights Commission did. And of course, that was during the Obama era when it was open season on Christians. It'd be great if people would get along, but that's not going to happen because of a court decision. It's going to happen because people decide that, hey, people have different views on this. But what we're seeing with these wedding vendors like Jack Phillips is that these activists, LGBT activists, are targeting them to make examples out of them. As long as that's occurring, these things are going to be challenged. You're going to see people of faith pushing back, and it's going to be in the courts. And you're absolutely right. Under the Roberts Court, they've had very narrow decisions with limited application of their decisions. So this is not surprising. But this thing is going to be back before the courts, and you're right. It could be decided that Thursday. They're going to be looking at the Flores case.
Yeah, and something tells me if they vote yes on that Justice Kennedy isn't going anywhere. I think he'd like to stick around and be a part of the consideration of that case if they move forward on that one. I want to ask you all, too, about something that's kind of flown under the radar. We've been following the case of underage illegal women who come across the border that are here in the States and then seeking an abortion. And the ACLU and other groups have rallied to them to say it shouldn't matter where they are, they should get help with these abortions, whether they're here illegally or not. Today, the Supreme Court vacated a lower court ruling that essentially had said, yes, the administration has to help them with that, or when they're in federal custody, that has to be allowed. But it's moot because the young woman who was at the center of that case did get an abortion. Now, the ACLU says that they're not going to stop fighting on this. So the two sides have weighed in. The Department of Justice said this: we're pleased with the Supreme Court's decision to set aside a lower court decision that allowed for an unaccompanied minor to receive an abortion while in federal custody. The Supreme Court has repeatedly made clear that the federal government is not required to facilitate abortions for minors. NARAL, obviously a pro-choice group, says this: every woman deserves the right to make decisions about her life, body, and future, regardless of her immigration status. Want to get reaction from both of you. Tyler, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and you know, Shannon, this is a really interesting thing to talk about. I think that my organization, because we're a conservative group that does advocate for LGBT issues, I think that a lot of people end up wondering if we're working on other social issues and how we feel about these other things. And I have to tell you, this is just not something that I'm an expert on. But I do think that here it's important to take a full and consistent pro-life position. It wasn't until the last year that our government began to detain pregnant, undocumented women. And I think that at the core of this, it's that we're detaining pregnant, undocumented women, and we should reverse that policy. I think that the most pro-life thing that we could do right now, and this has been advocated by the Catholic bishops and the Southern Baptist Convention, is that we should not be detaining pregnant women, and we wouldn't have this problem to begin with.
Yeah, and I think, Tony, I think part of the problem that stems from these cases is the fact that these are minors, and in many cases that leaves
these are minors.
That leaves officials with no other choice. Your reaction?
Right. Well, first off, I commend the Department of Justice because we've been working with them on this. They were working very diligently to find sponsors for some of these unaccompanied minors. This is still an issue. It's ongoing, and other courts, I think there's concern that they'll be forced to facilitate these abortions in other cases. So I think this court decision is a very good one, and I look for the Justice Department to make the most of this, because this is an administration that is very committed to upholding the sanctity of human life, all human life, regardless of what side of the border or the tracks it's conceived on. So I think this is a good decision, and I look forward to the Department of Justice making the most of it.
Tony and Tyler, we thank you both for a very respectful, thorough conversation on these two hot cases. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Shannon.